Hello fellow homesteaders, welcome to Nika's first homestead talk. And for our first homestead talk, I'm going to kind of talk about like how, where, why, whatever Brandon and I ended up being off-grid. I was born and raised in Montana. Brandon was born and raised in Minnesota. So we're both super familiar with super cold climates. But when we were both living in Montana, we had a little house. And there was kind of a point where Brandon was like, would you rather keep paying a mortgage or do you want to buy some land? And I went with the land. And thus started our off-grid journey. And there was a lot of smaller decision reasons why we went off-grid, but a big part of it was because kind of the system we were living in, we didn't like it. It didn't fit our goals and our morals and our values, and we just wanted something different. So we went off grid and moved into a tent, just like we did here in Arizona, and we began building our first dome, kind of simple survival model Earthship. It was our first time really building anything for ourselves, so it was a huge learning journey, but it was super amazing. We also started kind of collecting critters to raise for food and to help maintain the land. And I myself, living in Montana, I did a lot of work on ranches with animals, driving tractors and all that good stuff. So a lot of this stuff was very familiar to me, but building a house and a homestead was definitely new for both of us. And we started simple, like I said, in a tent, one solar panel, one battery, and an inverter. Just enough to power our phones, pretty much. And as we built everything up, everything else built up with us. So as we bought a little bit more solar, we were able to use more things that needed to be plugged in. And we started off hauling our water, and as we built the water catchment system, we were able to have more water and start growing our gardens because gardens need lots of water. So as we built up the rainwater catchment, we could build up the gardens, as well as add more animals because we had enough water for them as well. And as the whole system built up and we gained practice and knowledge and trialed and errored and just kind of figured things out, everything just kept growing outwards from there. And we did end up building another Earthship. We built 4 in all in Montana, and each one very different from the next, kind of figuring out what works best for our climate, for the area, just what we liked. And it was definitely more Brandon's designing and building, but on my side, I learned a lot about, raising all these different animals, breeding these animals more, doing a lot of the kind of conventional wifey homemaker stuff. Like, I learned how to do a lot more sewing. I learned how to repair shoes, how to make certain pieces of clothing. I put together a huge medical kit, and I learned how to do things like sutures and how to do kind of emergency bodily care stuff if it was ever needed. Because we are a little bit homestead and a little bit prepper. Because homesteading is a whole lot like prepping. You have a bulk items for certain things for certain reasons. Especially in Montana with those long, harsh winters and where our homestead was, we could get snowed up in our homesteaded space for like months at a time. So we always had a bulk of animal food, our food, toilet paper, all those things. So it was kind of like prepping, but we're homesteading. They're really not that far apart. Homesteading is just farming, growing your own food and animals versus, bunker, hoard the toilet paper, tinfoil hat prepping. But we are a little bit tinfoil hat, just to state. Because we do want to make sure that we are as reliant on ourselves as we possibly can. So there are certain creature comforts that we go without for a long time until we've built the system up enough to bring that creature comfort back into the fold. As well as sometimes we'd rather do the more manual labor side of things than having the fancy thing that makes it easier. For example, me and my mudding. I don't want to use a cement mixer. It takes energy, they're mechanical, they can break, and honestly, they can't create the mud mixture that I prefer. There are many people who use them, and that's wonderful. It's no judging, or no judgment here. But I like to use my hands so that if and when we couldn't get a cement mixer anyway, it's not a big deal because I can mix it up with my hands pretty great, as well as it's a pretty nice workout. And it's thinking about things too, like when it comes to cooking. We've had just a simple little cook stove, and it's nice because now we have the rocket stove, but now that summer's coming here, I'm not gonna be using the rocket stove as much for cooking. But that's where I've learned how to build little solar ovens to use the sun, and that's what's great about Arizona is there's so much sun that I wouldn't need to use any sort of stove or rocket stove to cook as long as it's sunny out. So there's certain things that it may seem like we've kind of fallen back and are more primitive in a sense, but to us that is more sustainable for us and our goals and morals and values. So there's certain things that we just do without because we don't need them. They're not a requirement for our comfort. But there are certain things that it's just nice to have, and that's okay too. But we always kind of build up to a point where we can bring those fancy things back into the fold. And this journey of off-grid homesteading, learning what you need and don't need and what you can go without and what you can't go without, it's pretty tumultuous and can be very hard and frustrating and daunting and absolutely exhausting. But the fact that we're doing these things for ourselves without relying on the outside system at least as much is absolutely fabulous. And we've gotten to a point where we don't need the regular 9 to 5. We have our own little side hustles and we go do odd jobs and work, but once we get built up here enough, we'll be able to sell, critters and plants and do all sorts of things to bring in enough income that we can survive on. But because we have built things up to the point, or will build up to a point where there's a lot of things that we don't have to buy anymore. Once you have enough solar, you don't have to pay for electricity. Once you have enough rain catchment, there's no water bill. Once you're not having to drive back and forth to work, that's that much less gas, that much less wear and tear on your vehicle. Once you learn how to repair clothes and bake and build and grow certain things, as you build the system, there's less and less things you need to buy, so there's less and less money that's needed. But it's also great too, because if you do keep the 9 to 5 or you have some sort of steady income, that money can go to making the system bigger, better, bring in more of those fancy creature comforts. And that's just how we decided to do things. We started very small, very simple, with virtually nothing in the sense of creature comforts. And as we built everything in, things became easier, more comfortable. We could do more. And now that the gabion is all closed in, we have that much more space. And so a lot of it is about patience and just the perseverance and the personal ability to keep driving through those discomforting times, because once you bring in those comfort things, it's all the more luxury. Like, it's sleeping on the ground to sleeping on a mattress. It's a huge difference, and you will never complain about an uncomfy mattress again because you know what it's like to sleep on the ground. And that aspect kind of goes with everything, from having no electricity to having enough electricity that you can run some of the fun little things. And there really is no right or wrong way to build up a homestead. This is just how we do it. We start small and we build up with lots of manual labor, using kind of the easiest methods and tools that we have available to achieve our goals. For us, it's really just a step-by-step, one foot after another, problem solving, creativity, using our imagination that for us brings us to where we are and will get us to where we are going. And being able to prepare for certain things that may happen, or at least knowing what we would do in those situations, makes just the whole system that much easier. And it is exciting to see things build up. And it's kind of like, when you have a puppy and all of a sudden you look at the puppy and they're huge and you're like, what the heck? It's definitely that same kind of aspect when it comes to building up your homestead, is you'll be like, we're not getting far enough. But then you turn around and everything is going, it's working, it's moving, it's grooving. It may not be perfect, but it is something that like we have built with our own hands. And even though it's super wabi-sabi and not to conventional standards, so to say, we enjoy this lifestyle very much. We enjoy the simplicity, the minimalism, the not being cluttered and crowded and crazy like kind of the city life brings into people's lives. And doing things the way we do is not the only way to do. If you have the ability, the time, the money, whatever it is, you can have all the fancy things, all the nice things, and all the things set up where you don't even have to lift a finger. But for us, we enjoy that kind of hard grind learning process of how to get to that fancy point of things without the system helping us that much, at least, as little as possible. And that has made the journey I've learned more than I think I could have ever learned in any other kind of setting or fashion. I know how to do almost anything. Like, not saying I could go on Survivor and like do awesome, but I am very confident in my abilities that if the world went kablooey, we would be pretty set. And I definitely say that because when lockdowns happened, when we were in Montana, our lives really did not change whatsoever. The only difference really was that when we did go to town, we had to wear a mask. And that was maybe once a month. So our lifestyle has definitely proven to be a lifestyle that fits our goals, our wants. It kind of buffers us from the chaoticness of kind of the outside world, so to say. And it hasn't been easy to get here. It's been a long grind, lots of hustling, lots of good days, bad days, cold days. But now that we're in Arizona, not as many of those cold days, which is the best plus. And that's one of the biggest reasons we ended up in Arizona, was because Montana is cold for like 6 to 9 months out of the year. And then the summers are like ridiculously hot. And so the transition from Montana to Arizona actually wasn't too much of a transition. It's literally just minus the winters. People may think that Arizona is just deathly hot, and it is more down south or up north. And here it's almost exactly like Montana. The days are just hot for longer. It's not really that much hotter than Montana. On top of the fact that Montana would get 12 to 14 inches of rain, and where we are in Arizona gets 12 to 14 inches of rain. So our transition from Montana to building our new homestead in Arizona, the acclimation actually wasn't that intense because it's so similar here. And that includes a lot of the fauna and the flora. I mean, in reality, there's just bigger bugs here. But in Montana, we got the lions, we got the bears, we got the coyotes. And down here, we got the lions, we got the bears, we got the coyotes. So there's a lot of things that are exactly the same. It's just the lack of winter. And I love the lack of winter. I do really miss the snow, but this journey in Arizona has proven to be absolutely phenomenal, especially without having to prep for long, cold, ridiculous winters. As well as here in Arizona, it's so much easier on the animals and for breeding and babies and gardening and all that. Arizona was truly, truly, truly a great move for us so that we could achieve our goals when it comes to homesteading. I feel like that was a bit of a rambly little first Nika's Homestead talk, talking about kind of our homesteading journey, but I hope you were entertained and enjoyed, and we'll definitely be talking about more random stuff, but I think next time we'll be talking about chickens, since there's a lot of issues with chickens right now. And this little Funkadoo thing here is actually my Inky brooder that I still need to tinker, but it is actually warming up for the little kind of trial run. No eggs, but making sure it actually gets to temperature and all that jazz. But I'm really excited to continue these homestead talks where I can just kind of ramble off and talk about fun stuff. So definitely throw in the comments kind of anything, a little bit more particular topics that you may want me to cover. And I will we'll sit down and you can just kind of turn on a little homestead talk and just listen to me blab on a topic. So again, I hope you all enjoyed my homesteading rambles, and we will see you in the next video or in the next Nika's Homestead Talk. Peace.